Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There should be a sign-up sheet in the back of the room if you would like to make a comment at the end of the school board meeting. Moving on to our second subject this evening, we're going on to our agenda, approvals, deletions, and additions, and I will call in Dr. Bracco on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Baxo. We do have two amendments, and both of these revisions are at your workstations under Roman numeral 7B2, Terry Mucha, professional leave request. There's an update there. And then under 7H, Mr. James, there's a revision to the donations as well. Everything else is the same as you received last week.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Lessentine. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Marshall. Any comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to our correspondence section. Do we have any correspondence, Ms. Suze?
None at this time.
Thank you very much. We are going to forego our liaison committee updates this evening, as we have quite a few individuals here to be recognized. And so we will move on to our official school board business topics, our consent agenda. Dr. Bracco.
Thank you again. Seek board approval for the minutes from the November 19th regular meeting, December 3rd executive session, and December 10th special meeting, and also approval of claims, payroll, and extracurricular expenditures you received from Mr. James last week.
Move to approve. Second.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Suze, and we have a second from Ms. Lessentine. Any comments or questions regarding the consent agenda?
I just have a quick question about the $78,000 payment to NIPSCO. Were you able to research that?
Yes, I was. That
Okay.
was for the monthly heating and cooling here at the high school, the electric and gas bill. It's actually down. It was more than that in October, and it was even more than that in September, just because it's a lot more expensive to heat, to cool than it is to heat. And so now that we're in the cooling season, claims are going down. Heating season. It's cool outside, heating season.
Because it threw me because it said electric, so I thought it was.
It's
for-
gas and, it's the gas and
I
electric.
just didn't see the gas on there. All right, thank you.
All right, any more questions, any more comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to our public comments regarding action items. Are there any public comments this evening regarding our action items?
Jamie saying no.
Seeing you're shaking your head no. We will move on to our official school board business topics for this evening, our regular agenda. Dr. Bracco.
Okay, so we are going to recognize some students this evening from both Protzman and Bibbage. We'll start with Protzman. So we'll ask Kathy Sapita, principal, to come forward and share with us what's going on. The board, I'll ask you to reconvene in front so we can congratulate our student participants.
Oh, whichever you're with.
Can you get through up there?
You're good.
Okay.
Good evening. On November 15th, Protzman participated in the elementary spell bowl competition at Kaler Middle School. The team consisted of 15 fourth graders and was led by coaches Kristen Fisher and Kat Finnegan. This is Mrs. Finnegan. She's here tonight to give out the certificates to the students. Protzman placed second in their division in the local competition and placed in the top 10 in the state. So we were extremely proud of the students and all the work of our coaches as well. So.
They have 750 words. They wrote them lots and lots. They really worked hard and they did a great job. I'm going to go ahead and call. I'm not sure who all is here tonight. Gala Alabed. Sure. Gavin Chirilla.
This way.
Shake everybody's hand.
Over there.
Give everybody a little skin. Way to go, man.
Amar Diaz. Tyler
Young man.
Grayson.
Congratulations.
Blake Kowalski. Mia Pimentel. Sydney Rippey.
Congratulations.
Ben Schultz. Alan Schultz.
Congratulations. Good job. Good job, young man.
Archie Shaw. Ryer Triesenberg.
Congratulations.
Aubrey Walker. And that's it. That's everyone.
Great job.
I tell all the parents of Protsman to stand up and be recognized, but some of you already are, but we'll still applaud you for encouraging your kids. And now we'd like to ask Mrs. Logan to come forward. She is here, right?
Yes, yes.
Hiding in the back.
You're hiding behind.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be here this evening. Vivitch is here for the same reason as Protsman. Unfortunately, Coach Miss Snow is not able to be here today. She's fighting illness, so she's here with us in thought. So in the competition, let's see. Okay, in the competition at Kaler Middle School, we had 11 fourth graders participate, and Vivitch came in first place in the local competition and third place out of 56 teams in the state, so we are very proud of that. And really happy to have 2 teams from Lake Central in the top 10. If you look at all the standings, if you go to the website, it's a big deal. We're excited for it. So I'm going to call up the students. JC Delia. Jillian Kerstetter.
Good job.
Grace Martis. Abigail Moore.
Good job, gentlemen.
Josina Nye. Joseph Rieger.
Super job. Whoa.
Watch the chorus.
Jillian Reardon.
Congratulations. Good job. Thank you.
Luca Robistelli. Cristiano Sanchez. Max Motrilla. And Samantha Stauffer.
Max,
All right,
Max,
and
good
Village
job.
parents, you want to wave your hands down? Thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. And Merry Christmas. You're welcome to stay for our meeting, but if you need to get on to other things, we understand this is a good time to go.
She goes by Anna?
It's her in the mic.
Okay, moving on, our next agenda item is to discuss with the board a donation of land by the estate of John Plaskoda. His daughter and son are with us this evening. And so we want to, I know the name Andrea Quint, I'm not sure John's son's name, so if you could. Tom, thank you for coming, and thank you for your kind donation to the school corporation. This is a piece of wooded land behind Coling Elementary School, directly east of the property we currently own. And while you won't take action tonight, board, because the financial documents with our attorney have not been completed, if it can be done by the end of the year, that's their desire to close out this donation in the current calendar year. So we wanted to make you aware of it in the case that could happen. But we want to again thank Tom and Andrea for thinking about Lake Central, and we have some nature trails behind Coling currently, and with this extra space we can possibly expand it and improve it. And so we thank you, Tom and Andrea.
Don?
Where are they?
Yes.
Is that you in the white?
Yeah.
That's you, okay.
Hello.
And
My
that's,
brother wanted to say a couple of words.
Yeah, come on,
Thank you.
come on up.
yes.
Definitely.
First of all, thank you for inviting us tonight, and we're here on behalf of my parents' estate, John and Dolores Plaskoda, and they were involved in their lives together. They were involved in a couple of different businesses, but the one that they really enjoyed the most was land improvement, where they would purchase property, improve it, and work with building developers, general contractors, and business owners to make final use of the property. And as it turns out, many of those properties, or several at least, were within the boundaries of the school corporation, some as close as right across the street. So we couldn't think of a better way to give back to the community than to donate this property to the school corporation, in hopes that you could make good use of it for the benefit of the community and the students, of course. So again, thanks for having us, and hope we can get things finalized to your satisfaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Don?
Thank you, Tom and Andrea. Yes, Howard.
Just a point of information, Dr. Varacco, in light of the fact they want to have this completed before the end of 2018, would it be appropriate for us as a board to grant the president the opportunity to sign off if and when that were to happen prior to the new year coming into play? Can we do any kind of a motion like that?
If you want to.
Would it be appropriate? It was your
I think
intention to have this
it's
completed.
safer for all parties if you let it be buttoned up before you do a final approval.
Yeah, and Howard, I think that documentation will come and be in my hands before the end of the year. I'll
Okay,
be able to
fine.
sign it, yeah.
That's all I was
But-
questioning.
Okay.
It's because it's your vote, technically when somebody is giving us something for free is a
Right.
formality. I think we would be safe. We would be comfortable as an administration moving forward. But I understand what you're saying. Howard.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Howard. All right.
Okay.
I think we're still with Dr. Varacco.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to my third item then, is I wanted to update the board really quickly about the meeting we attended on Friday down in Indianapolis. A couple other presentations I'd like to talk about at a future meeting, but I didn't want this to go on too long. I wanted to talk briefly about the Miranda warnings of students. It was a timely issue because we had something similar to this not that long ago. And the attorneys told us that students should be given a warning about their right to avoid incriminating themselves, even at school, when an officer is questioning them because they're individually suspected of some misconduct. Students need not be given a warning if they are being questioned as a witness. The legal standard for administering the warning is at the time a reasonable person, or student in this case, feels that they're in custody, meaning they don't feel like they're free to leave. So if they don't feel like they're free to leave, that's a note to self that probably we're thinking that they are a suspect and not a witness. At Lake Central, our prevailing standard has been the moment any student gives an answer that indicates to us that they might be guilty of participating in the misconduct, that at that point, the Miranda warning should be given. Even if it is only the administrator doing the questioning, if the discussion changes due to the answer, leading an administrator to view the student as a potential suspect, continuing to question results in the administrator becoming a de facto agent of the police. Those are the terms that the attorney used with us last Friday. And that requires that the Miranda warning be given. Courts today, as you can imagine, with the safety issues that we have, are giving some latitude to school personnel. But administrators still need to be very careful on when that line is crossed into thinking this student is being questioned as more than just a witness. At our schools, historically, we've stopped questioning at school the minute we think that they are a suspect, and we ask the police to take them to the police station, whichever town it is in. Usually it's been a high school state situation, so it's been the St. John PD, and down there they do put them in a room where they can tape, video and audio tape the interview, or in some cases it turns into an interrogation. In the case of minors, if a student's removed from our building for interview at the police station, it's the police who will make sure that the parents are involved before questioning continues. We will merely contact the parents to tell them that a situation came up and that they need to know where their child is. But the police, the burden is on them not to move forward with a minor until they have that consent from parents.
But we do contact the parent to tell them that the student was taken out of the building? you're saying?
Immediately.
Okay.
Use of metal detector wands. A lot of schools took the wands, as we know. We took some wands ourselves. We typically only use them when we have reasonable suspicion. We have not used them in any random manner thus far. And only 3 schools in Indiana have embraced using them, according to the attorney, on a random basis, but not wanding 100% of the attendees at any event. They're using a random number generator to decide who they check, but that's only 3 out of hundreds of schools in Indiana. So I think the problem is the time it takes to use this process, and I can only vouch for walking through a scanner at the Bears game a month ago, getting there almost an hour early and barely making the kickoff. It is time consuming. And it takes upwards of a minute per person. So the wands may not be the answer, although we're happy to have them because we have had instances in the past where we've needed to use them. The final topic I wanted to touch on briefly is just the NSBA presentation on school safety. One of the things that jumped off the page at me was the speaker presented that they feel through their research and the data that several of the school shooters, their problems that led to their behavior was possibly fixable. And so they're going to work through both state and federal authorities to try to get additional psychological support for students in schools. We've experienced here an increase in the number of students per counselor, and up until we were successful last May in the referendum, haven't really had the resources to add those things, but we've made a commitment both to our community and to our board that we will be adding supports for students in the form of counselor and other types of positions to help students, not just who have violent tendencies, but who have other issues that we believe we can help them with. It was interesting that they said SROs and school safety teams must utilize a threat assessment to assess the risk of all reports, and that it's helpful if all of the protocols are discussed in school level teams. They pointed out that at Parkland, one of the teachers did not follow the school protocol and immediately lock her door. Through that process, she allowed nearly 20 additional students into her room before she locked the door, and that ended up happening to be the hallway that the killer walked down. So I found that interesting that even with the protocol, that teacher adjusted on the fly because she saw kids close enough that she was willing to take the risk to usher them in. And Ed's here tonight from the high school, and he knows that we always tell our staff members that whenever you see any kid anywhere close, pull them into your room don't worry about getting them back to their room. So the focus on prevention must be a point of emphasis at the federal and state level. That's good to hear that other people are going to be putting that out there as well. One thing we need to look in as a district is they recommended looking to technology that gives law enforcement remote access to our cameras. We have places that I won't talk about within our school district where the police know to go, where we have the banks of cameras set up for them to view, but they're suggesting in addition to that to figure out a way to get it, I take it to mean at their stations in some office. So we'll look at that piece. I was happy to hear and to feel like we're in really good shape when it comes to SRO / police relations. We hit most of the stuff they talked about. We do collaborate on safety plans. We have defined roles of our SROs. We share information. We allocate time across the district for the personnel that we have. All of our SROs are properly trained. And we have made the commitment, which they recommended, to keeping SROs employees of police agencies and not have them be employees of individual school districts. So that was just some stuff that I gleaned from our meeting last Friday. There were a couple other topics, as I said, that I'll expand on at our January meeting as well, because I think there's some interesting points that came from those presentations. I'd open it up now to Cindy or Janice to expand on any of those topics or anything I didn't mention.
You guys have anything to add as well for Dr. Brockers?
No, it was a good presentation. I felt almost more focused on the legal perspective, more appropriate for school attorneys. But because I have that background knowledge from my days at Ball State, I could kind of figure out what they were talking about. So, and when they talked about the threat assessment, I think that's such an important venue to think about, because when I was working in the school building, you would run all those scenarios by, this is what we would do if, this is what we would do if. But you know that situations are not going to be that way necessarily. That's where that risk assessment has to come in, and you have to think on your toes. And the lady at Parkland who held the door open so 20 more students could be saved, and the importance of that risk assessment and being willing to take the risk, and be out there.
Yeah, no, I was pleased to hear about the mental health, that they're really touching on that, so.
Great.
And a lot of the threat assessment for us is, unfortunately, stuff that comes to us from outside the school day via the internet and other social media type platforms. And with the schools and with Officer Patrick especially, they've adjusted that a couple times in the last 3 years, but they're thorough, and there have been a couple times where we've had officers from all 3 towns visiting the student's home. So it may make people uncomfortable. I was talking to the board at the end of our executive session tonight about Valparaiso today having an incident where they hauled a student out of the building. And evidently, the word is, he said he was just joking. But at this point in time, I find it hard to understand how anybody can want attention that bad to still know that schools are on high alert. And the reason is because the stuff's real. It's happening. It continues to happen. Violence in public, not just at schools, but violence. And so.
And I don't know anything about that situation, but that also makes me wonder where the counseling and the mental health comes in, because if a student is truly saying those things and doesn't understand the impact that they're having at this point with that, then there needs to be some sort of counseling involved. There needs to be some sort of assessment to find out. He may have been kidding, but why would you kid about that, like you said, at this point? So I think that will help having.
Well, I didn't put in my bullet points, but it was interesting that on Friday they did say that some of the courts are allowing schools to, in lieu of a suspension, to get checked out before you come back to school, which is sort of like a 2-decade ago process we used to do. Mainly when students would express suicidal ideology, we would say, please get yourself checked out before you come back to school. We won't count as And then they started frowning on that. No, don't keep anybody out of school for any of those reasons. But now the courts are saying, well, if they're threatening violence on others, yeah, now we think it's appropriate again. Good point.
Well, thank you guys for going to that seminar as well with Dr. Rocco. It does, it adds perspective and insight for the rest of us we don't usually get. So. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Thanks. My final topic is just to touch on this pathways thing, and I haven't even had time to talk to Sarah about it, but last week I went down to the national meeting on pathways, and they had international speaker from Australia there. We had national speakers from the states of California and Colorado, and as well as state presenters. The Australian said that their circumstances are very similar to the U.S. with resistant to changing the way we educate, despite the fact that there are a lot of people, 20-somethings, who are either underemployed or unemployed. And so, you know, the other thing that I found interesting was throughout the day, regardless of who the speaker was, they talked about their desire to have pathways for all students with no dead ends, meaning that there are hybrids in some of these other areas where if you change your mind partway through because you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, that doesn't jeopardize your ability to graduate high school in a timely manner. The Australian guy also made the point that he's fighting this battle. He's a professor. He's fighting this battle in Australia with convincing the entire society that getting students, young people, ready for meaningful employment is everyone's job. They have some, what he called social entrepreneurs, I think meaning people who have done well for themselves, who want to give back and want to try to influence other people. I think when I look back on my career 30 years ago, we had businesses that had, you know, pretty extensive training programs for their incoming employees, and then it sort of went by the wayside, and to where they want the trade schools and or the universities to prepare their people for what they need so that they could get out of that business. Now they're realizing that really to be able to bring people in who aren't going to work for 9 months and then take the next best deal, they probably need to put more skin in the game and get more involved. I found it interesting that Colorado implemented a meaningful apprenticeship program about 3.5 years ago with a goal of 20,000 placements in a decade. So they were trying to get to 20,000 in 10 years. In Indiana, our goal is however many seniors we have, 80 or 90,000 in 4 years, without really saying how many we currently have placed now, which I suspect is less than 1,000. And you know, the California model, which you can imagine is you know, still concerned about making the high school experience one that's just trying to get people regimented into what they're gonna do for a living after they graduate. They're also looking for ways which I think would benefit the entire country to recognize learning that takes place outside the classroom. We're in love with standardized tests in this country, but we you know, at the university you can test out of Spanish 2 and 3 if you're fluent, but at the high school, if you're fluent in U.S. history because you've already had it in 4th, 7th, and 8th grade, you can't take a test and then forego that high school U.S. history and take something else. So they're looking at ways to do that so that students can, you know, pursue their passions or some other electives that they may just find enriching. I found it interesting that the national speakers from California and Colorado said not just in their states but across this nation, America has a unique problem of the inability to retain teachers, that the turnover among teachers in our country is much greater than in other countries. Now, they didn't really get into what that was caused by. It could be caused by low salaries, and it could be caused by opportunity in other industries. They suggested that they believe it's due to a lack of respect and financial commitment, that we don't do enough ongoing, continuous professional learning. And they also said something that I put in italics for the board, that they believe local school districts need to expand their induction programs. In other words, make them feel more comfortable starting out as a new employee of your particular district, so that if their initial experience is really strong, that they'll be less inclined to leave. And it does make sense, especially for people completely new to the industry. The governor's representative said that they're concerned about recent statistics showing as many as 45,000 Indiana high school students graduate annually and have no plans after high school, which to me is about half the graduating class. And then there's an additional 8,500 who enroll in 2- and 4-year schools who don't go back for year 2. So either they flunk out or drop out. And they believe that we've got to figure out a way to have kids pursue stuff after high school that is more relevant to them. And that all makes sense. They want to add flexibility to funding successful programs that are in place. We have not seen that since I've been at central office. We have not seen a significant amount of additional flexibility or additional funding. The governor's reps acknowledged that Indiana lags other Midwestern states in teacher compensation. They did not share any plans to do anything significant about it. I'm thankful that our community supported us so that we can locally do something about it, so that the problem is lessened for us than it is for some of our other peers in Indiana. The governor intends to study the situation after this year's revenue forecast, but because it's not really great, he has not made a commitment to it. And there were a lot of comments, which if you've been following this story, it's been going on for 2 decades, that we need to get away from this industrial form of education into something that's a little bit more flexible and better meets the needs and desires and wishes of our students. Again, some of the speakers talked about taking something off the educator plate, but no one ever talks about what that might be. And if you look at what our General Assembly has done in the last 5 years, they continually pile more stuff on and never take anything away, and they usually pile stuff on without any money attached to help us accomplish that thing. And I'm proud to say that our teachers and our administrators figure out a way to expose students to that content and make them more aware. Problem is that the world's changing faster than maybe we are, so we have to just be aware of what all that is. The locally created pathways was touched on again, including by Byron Ernest, who is one of the State Board of Education leaders. And he's very hopeful that there are many more locally created pathways. Currently there are 2. One, as I joke, is for the museum curator, which there aren't that many museums, but it's a pathway. And the other one is a group up in Elkhart that works with the recreational vehicle industry, where essentially the high school becomes a training ground for many of their employees. And I'm not knocking it. It's rather limited, but it does get people into jobs that pay pretty well. And if that's what people want, then I'm all for it. But besides those 2 locally created pathways, we're still sort of in that scenario where there is a certain niche of our students who we're not sure a pathway exists for them. So we'll keep working on this. But I just found it interesting that the other states are, trying also to have pathways, and it makes sense, provided we don't punish students who start one way and then at a young age decide, I'm glad I did that. We always talk about our internships here, and especially like with our cadet teaching, where we probably place 20 kids a year in our elementary schools, and 15 or 16 of them, they finish and say, I am so glad I did this, I can't wait to go on and be a teacher. But 3 or 4 every year say, I think that job's a lot harder than what I expected. I found it more frustrating. I didn't enjoy it to the level that I thought I'm going to pick a different major, which is every bit as valuable, right? And so I just hope that what we do doesn't lead to hurting students. Because if students can't get a diploma after 4 years because they don't hit an SAT score, a designed test to weed out college students, and we're giving it to every student, even those who never planned to go to college, I think that's problematic for us. So we have to just be smart about what we're doing and remember who we serve. And so we'll continue to follow this story. Sarah will have more updates in the future that, relate specifically to Indiana. Remember that this new program is in effect for the current 8th graders. So when they come to us as freshmen next year, we need to be able to show them how at Lake Central, when they change their mind as a sophomore and shift into something different, what is the flexibility we have that, okay, they're going down this path, and all of a sudden they move. What's that mean? What might they have to give up now to still graduate on time, or do they have to give up anything? Because usually there is a trade-off, and as they shift, there's a chance that something may have to go away. And I think I told the board a couple meetings ago that when I was at the ISMA meeting, that both the local and state level music folks are concerned that they could suffer some losses as kids need to adjust. Their PSAT score doesn't show that they're going to hit the SAT score, so schools will encourage them to consider a different path, which then causes them to lose an elective, which they fear could be choir or band. And so there are a lot of concerns out there. I'm not saying that it's all wrong. Some people are probably looking at doing some other things. We couldn't do 0 hour because we're already really early, but maybe there are some opportunities to do something, after school for some of those students who get caught up in this trap of changing their mind and then still needing to graduate on time. So more to come, but I just wanted to talk about it because I went down there and I found it interesting that when you think about what Colorado's lofty ambitions are, and Indiana's are 5 times as much. And you really have to question the capacity of internships or meaningful apprenticeships, especially in the rural areas where there just really aren't a lot of opportunities to place kids within a reasonable driving distance. So I don't know how that's going to work.
Well, and even in the internships, while I think it's a great idea, I think teachers have been trained to deal with teenagers where maybe people that are working the internships that are out in the field, those people haven't really been trained to work with teenagers. And while I love them very much and I love hanging out with them every day, everybody doesn't like hanging out with teenagers every day. So I think they need to consider that as well, as when they're placing these kids, if you get that angry kid that's having a bad day, it's one thing to have a bad day with a teacher that knows you, that has a rapport with you. It's another thing to have a bad day on a job site with someone who's like, I'm done, now what?
Yeah.
Well, sure, because the industries, they're looking to get a little bit back from the deal
Right.
too. They're not looking just to be,
Correct.
making a donation, if you will. They're looking
Right.
for some return, either somebody who starts to contribute to their organization or potentially down the road becomes an employee. My fear for it is that if we try to place 100% of the students, even those that really are reluctant to do it, some employers are going to have one bad experience and say thanks, but I'm done with that, and that's a problem. That was a problem in the old days when we had our internships too. We would have to go back and really do damage control with somebody when a student, for instance, didn't show up. Maybe they weren't even misbehaving, they just weren't reliable. And, we pulled them, but then we have to do damage control with our kind local business person who was giving students opportunities. So anyway, I won't ramble on that. We got other topics, but we'll keep the board posted on where we're headed with pathways.
Any other
Through the
questions
spring.
or comments for Dr. Rocco?
I have a question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So when we look at these career pathways, and I know there's that complex picture and it has all those little, and you have to take a certain test, etc. But when we talk about a pathway that a child would choose to go down, would that not be also some of the work-based learning that's happening? Or am I
It
confused
could be,
by that?
so box 2
Oh.
could be work-based learning, it could be a
Okay.
special project, it could be philanthropy. There are several different options. That's the one I told you I thought
Yes.
an Eagle Scout could
Yes.
fit neatly into box 2, even
Yes.
though it's not even a school activity.
Okay.
But I think it would meet it would satisfy because of the long-term commitment of the student and the fact that they have to put together a team and orchestrate the work. Probably not every project, but many of them would.
And then my other question would be, and I know I asked this many years ago, and I know at that time I never got an answer, so I'm gonna ask it again. Because I forgot I didn't get an answer, but do we have follow-up data? Do we do postgraduate, do we follow our graduates? Do we do data on them after they graduate?
So they do push out through Naviance, which is the system that we use at the high school and also have incorporated at the middle school, surveys to students who have graduated to try to find out where they're at with their post-secondary plans, because they declare that before they leave us. It's just on the ownership of the student to respond and fill out that information for us. It's a little easier to track through the colleges, but when they go into the workforce, they really just have to fill that out in order to respond to us and let us know down which path they've gone.
Do you know our percentage of students that go to year 2 then in their college studies? Do you know that percentage?
Not off the top of my head, I would have to talk with the high school to find out if they have that data. Because we just put Naviance into place at the high school, I think about 4 or 5 years ago. So the first cohort went through with Naviance and then has graduated and started to move on. So I'm not sure how many cohorts or years we have of that.
So we didn't do any follow-up with the graduates until Naviance came in?
No, we did, and who we would get response from were the people who were meaningfully employed or were still enrolled or had graduated college. It's the people that weren't meeting their own expectations that would become a black hole. So you never had complete data.
No,
That's the problem.
I know that. I would just be
And some
curious.
people just may have, they may have moved across the ocean, and so
Right.
they may be gainfully employed.
Or they
but
just
you
don't want to
lose track
share.
of them.
They don't want to share.
And some
That's-
people don't, yeah.
That's our
true.
prerogative. I'm just curious as to what our data does show. I would like to know at some point in time. So, thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Well, moving on. Since Terry Mucha is unable to be with us tonight, Dr. Bracco will take over, Director of Human
Sure,
Resources.
and so seek board permission, yeah, I guess permission to act on all of the recommendations in the packet.
Okay.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Lessentine. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second from Ms. Suze. Any comments or questions? I do have a comment. I'm not too happy about one of the retirements on here.
I know.
I know.
I just saw that, and
really
I'm not
sad
too
one. I'm
happy
not
about
sure
that
which
one
you're talking
retirement.
about.
I wouldn't just single out one.
Well,
A lot of good people.
there's a lot of good
A
people.
lot of them, but I'm gonna single out Lori Brum because I love her with all my heart, and I tried to get her to stay a little bit longer.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit longer.
So when you say the whole packet, are you talking this whole packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, the entire
Good
packet.
People that are
That's what
retiring.
you,
The personnel, yeah, the entire
Okay.
personnel recommendations
Okay.
packet. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
wait, I think I have I just want to make sure that I understand these classified staff pay increases.
We're not on that one yet.
We're on
We're
number
not
one.
Oh, I thought, when you said the whole packet, I thought you meant
Just the
everything.
personnel, just the personnel.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we'll just do the personnel recommendations, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay.
Next, we are looking for board approval for the professional leave request that you received last week, and then a couple different, one additional one this evening.
Move to approve.
Well, motion from Mr. Marshall, and I will second that motion. Any comments or questions regarding the professional leave request? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we move on to the classified raises.
So seek board approval of the sheet that Rob has provided you with recommendations for increases for hourly workers in Lake Central.
Move to approve?
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Suze.
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Marshall. Any comments or questions regarding those classified raises?
Okay, so I just want to make sure, we're taking the proposed starting pay raise, and then it goes to the proposed top pay rate, correct?
That's correct.
And so, does it take a person just 1 year to go from the starting rate to the top pay rate, is that correct?
Well, not automatic.
Oh.
It's not.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So what's shown here is the first two columns show what our current starting pay rate
Right.
is. And then for some areas, we felt we had to increase the starting pay rate. In other areas, the starting pay rate is staying the same. So that's what the first two columns are showing,
Okay.
with the current starting pay and with the,
Okay.
and as you know, in our groups, we have a starting rate and then we have at the everybody else rate. And so the last two columns on the right indicate what the current top pay is and then what we are recommending that moves to. And then as noted on the bottom of the second page, anyone who's been in that current position since January 31st of 2018, so it's just under a year, they will be moved to the top rate if they're not there already. But anyone who's come into their position and in essence less than a year, then they will be at the starting rate still.
Okay. I
So
didn't see
if someone is, if they're in an area where that starting rate that we're proposing base rate is to increase as well, then they would see an increase,
Okay.
even though they're less than a
Okay.
year.
Okay.
So, and we use that, just to give you some background, we just use that end of January rate because we knew some people come in soon after the second semester starts, maybe within that first week or two, and in essence, they've been here almost like a full year at that point. So, but we had to cut it off at some point, and so we use that January 31st date as the difference between the two. But, you know, it's been 18 months since we've given a pay increase to the classified staff. It was 18 months before that. So it's not until we come back to you where we have dollars available to make an increase where someone would go from that starting rate to the rest of the rate. So it's not automatic after 1 year.
Good.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity on that.
Sure.
And this is, I appreciated the, when you provided the document that compared us to, I believe that was Crown Point and
Was it Munster?
Dunlin, I think.
Crown Point, Maryville, Munster, most of the people who are our size and that people, you know, will often compare us to. So, yeah, and then as we've explained to you throughout the month here is, you know, it's all data driven. You know, we want to make sure our folks are competitive on both sides at the starting rate and at the top rate with our neighbors, and we want to get the best people we can here.
Yeah, and I think that focus that way, to have that type of focus it behooves us.
Yeah.
It's a good move. A couple of places I would have liked to see a little bit higher increase, but oh well. It's still a good beginning, I think, and we'll keep working on it.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, let's take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And the final item is my contract, and so you do need to take specific board action to increase the superintendent contract by the same $1,000 increase that other administrators and veteran teachers got for the 18-19 school year.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion with Mr. Marshall. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, we have a second from Dr. Malcolm? Okay. Any comments or questions regarding the superintendent's contract?
I just had one question. I couldn't find my copy at home, but I ran out of time to call and ask for a copy. But I believe there is an item in there where it says can be extended year by year. Is that correct? Did I see that?
Correct. It's a 3-year contract that if no action is taken, it can extend by an extra year so that it has 3 years on it again next year if
Okay.
no action is taken. It would be,
Okay.
all the terms would stay the same, but it could be
Okay.
extended by a year.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, let's take a vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And a big thank you for that one.
All right, thank you. And
Sarah.
we're going to move on to our Director of Primary Education, and Sarah Castaneda is going to take that agenda this evening.
Thank you. For Teresa's first item and only item, she is seeking your approval for the professional leave requests that were in your packet.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Lessentine. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Dr. Malkow. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And now moving on to our Director of Secondary Education again, Sarah Castaneda.
Thank you. For my first item, I am seeking your approval for the professional leave request as presented.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Suze, and I shall second that motion. Are there any comments or questions regarding those professional leave requests?
I have a question. You know, the professional leave for water tower, but I didn't see the field trip, so had it come in earlier?
For the N-Teens field trip?
Uh-huh.
Yes, I believe that already went through.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And then for my other item, at your stations this evening, you should have received a packet with admin I-Learn. I'm just going to go through some of the information that we have covered with our principals, assistant principals, and we've also been able to meet with all of our teachers who are going to be subject to the new I-Learn test as well. Teresa and I have talked about this before, but just to recap, the new I-Learn assessment that is replacing iStep for grades 3 through 8, as well as biology, is going to consist of just one test window now, instead of the two that we had before. So it's April 22nd to May 17th for grades 3 through 8. April 22nd to May 24th for high school biology. That may look a little bit odd considering it's just a single test for the high school, but remember they also are running iStep grade 10 math and language arts, as well as iStep retesting for grades 11 and 12 all at the same time. So that's why that window is extended, because the state wants us to give the math and language arts test before anyone touches a biology or a social studies test. One interesting thing that they have changed with the new assessment is that students are going to come back, instead of being placed in 3 categories, did not pass, pass, and pass plus. It's actually 4, below, approaching, at, or above proficiency. We like this addition because there are quite a few students who come close to that pass cut mark, and so it's validating the fact that they are approaching proficiency by adding that in there. The entire test is untimed. I know that some feedback that we got from the field, especially at the elementary level, was that the students knew how to tackle those more complex math problems or lengthier reading passages and essays that were on iStep tests in the past. However, they were unable to do it in the time that was given to them. So now for all of our students, not just students with accommodations, the entire test will be untimed. And then one thing that is new this year that's also a little bit easier for us on the administrative side is before we used to have to do these mass uploads of all the accommodations for our students with special needs, as well as mass uploads for students who were new to the corporation to make sure everybody was in the system. What it's doing now is pulling from 2 places using data we already send to the state. One is the RT or real-time report, so that'll update every week with any new students who enroll in the corporation. And then also Indiana IEP, which is where all of our IEP plans are managed. That's where they're going to pull all the accommodations from. So really what we have to do is just pull 504 and ILP plans for our English language learners, which is fabulous. It's a lot less work in addition with 94 kids. Most of the tests have 2 parts. The first test will be similar to the old multiple choice. The English language arts and math tests will be the computer adaptive ones, meaning that the questions are going to adjust as the students respond to them. And all questions are on the same grade level, so at no point will it move them below or above grade level, even if that's where they're at. In science and social studies, it is a fixed form test, so this is similar to the old test that we used to give for iStep, where all the kids receive the same questions. And then on each of those assessments, you will also have a performance task test, with the exception of 5th grade social studies. That's similar to the old applied skills, where students are going to have to read a passage and respond to it, or it's going to be those complicated math problems where they have to show application, reasoning skills, and problem solving. The English language arts performance task has 2 segments to it. One is a shorter constructed response, and then the other one is a lengthier essay. Both use a lot of textual evidence. Looking through the sample questions, the amount that students are going to have to read before responding to those prompts is significant. And so that's the way the test breaks down. In terms of the test times, AIR, which is the vendor for the new assessment, they have given this test in many other states. They are vendors for big states like Ohio, as well as New York and some other areas. Florida uses them as well. And so based on giving similar tests in those states, these are the proposed times that they've given us. It definitely is a little bit rough, but believe it or not, this actually is less test time than we used to spend on iStep between the 2 test windows. So it definitely looks a bit overwhelming, and I am not envious of our principals trying to figure out how to schedule this, because this is just average test times. Untimed means that
students have unlimited amount of time to get this done. And so trying to figure out how you proctor that and manage that within some of our buildings is definitely going to be challenging for our principals. This is a review of some of the test administration guidelines. They have to take the computer adaptive or fixed form multiple choice test before they do a performance task. They can finish that test in 1 day or multiple days. If they pause a test between days, one thing that they've cautioned us with already is that students will not have access to any of the questions that they've already been exposed to. So let's say that student is on question 20, and it's getting close to the end of the test time. One thing that's new for our teachers that we've talked about is we're going to have to give them warnings as we're getting close to when we want to stop. They don't have to stop, they'll get more time later, but we need to shut things down for the day because maybe it's just not productive anymore at that point. So reminding kids, you have 20 minutes left, you have 10 minutes left, find a good place to stop. Did you flag any items that you want to go back to? Because tomorrow you won't be able to see those questions anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's one change that we've been trying to work with our faculty on, so that way we kind of get into the habit of doing that with the students, and they get used to, okay, don't speed through it as quickly as possible. Take your time, you have unlimited time. But don't get too far ahead because you won't be able to go back and check everything the next day. With the reading passage questions, where they give you a lengthier reading passage and then say maybe 4 multiple choice that are tied to it, if a student were to get through 2 of those multiple choice questions, then they actually could still have access to that entire bank of questions because it's dependent on that piece of text, and they want to make sure the kid gets that back the next day. So that's the only sort of exception to the rule. With the language arts performance task, we've talked about how it's supposed to be given. Basically, the shorter one comes first, the lengthier essay comes second. This is similar to what we've done in the past with iStep. These actually are untimed as well, and these can extend over multiple days. The only thing is the test itself expires after 3 business days, so we do have to watch kids, if God forbid, come down with a really bad cold or have something happen where they're out of school for multiple days. A student has to finish a pause test before they can go on to the next section. And then we talked a little bit about what they should do if the student is absent. All of our teachers have a lot more to do with proctoring this test than before. Before we structured all of the test sessions, myself and Matt Hozek, who was our point person on the technology side, would make sure that everything was uploaded to go in as certain sections for each teacher. Now, there's really no rostering that takes place. The teacher is going to give up a code and assign the test themselves, but that is a little bit different than we've done in the past. So they are going to have to watch a 30-minute tutorial on that will walk them through what that process looks like, and then we'll do additional training with them as well as we get closer to the test. The DOE has released blueprints for our teachers. I will say this is probably some of the clearest guidance we've gotten about the state assessment. Previously, they would give us this weird check plus, check minus system, and sometimes it jived with what the kids saw on the test, sometimes it didn't. With this blueprint, what they've done is they've actually said how many items are going to be on the test from different categories, and then how do we prioritize them. So basically they've said that they're high priority, medium priority, and lesser priority. And then the DOE color coded it red, yellow, and green. I'll be honest, in my brain I would have done it the reverse, because to me green means go, but what they're meaning is red is critical. So looking at the blueprints, what that means is in the reporting standard item range, if the minimum number is 1, because remember for language arts and math it's an adaptive test, that means that every single student is guaranteed to see a question regarding that standard. So anything that starts with the 1 is something that you want to make a priority in your classroom. Anything that's a 0 to 2, 0 to 3, that is going to be a medium priority. It's likely most kids will see a question on that standard. And then if it's 0 to 1, it means students may not see a question regarding that standard. Now we're still going to teach all the standards, but from a pacing standpoint and a planning standpoint, it does help us kind of prioritize what we need to do with our instruction. What we ended up doing, and I won't pull these up for you, but basically we went through with each grade level team the blueprints, and then what we did was we took the standards, because I don't know off the top of my head what 6.8 up 0.3 standard is. And so we listed them out fully and color coded them, and then also broke down where we would find them within our pacing guides and things like that. And so we gave those to the teachers. And it was interesting to go through those with the teachers, because some of the things that we do, for example, at the middle school level, we do a lot with Greek and Latin groups to help kids with vocabulary to break down words. It's a low priority standard. It's still important that kids can break down a word in context, but really what the DOE is pushing for is more of context clues. So it was nice to be able to walk through that and see where could we free up some time, because as teachers we always talk about not having enough time to fit in everything that's on our plates, and so it's good when they give us some guidance to say you can pull back a little bit on this. So we did that for math, we did that for language arts, and we did that for science and social studies as well. For the math resources, what the DOE has given is guidance on what things students will have available during the test. For grades 3 through 5, there is no calculator that is allowed on the test because so much of it has to do with computation. But students may use a hundreds chart if it's listed as an accommodation in one of their individualized plans. When you hit grade 6, they can get a 4-function calculator. During calculator segments, it shows up automatically online. We don't give them handhelds so that we don't have any issues with calculators on wrong sections of tests. They can still use a hundreds chart as well as a 9x9 multiplication table. And then by the time they hit grade 7 and 8, the Desmos scientific calculator is there. Our math coaches have worked with our teachers to make sure that the students are not seeing that Desmos calculator for the first time on this test, and so they have done activities where it's incorporating that into different lessons that they're doing. There are sample activities that the DOE has released. A lot of these are related to some of the more complicated math tasks that we've looked at even when we were working with some of our people like Sharon Rack, or when we were going through and trying to come up with CEPAs for some of our units. And so it was nice to see that some of the things we'd already talked about was showing up in the resources the DOE was pointing us to. They pulled a lot from illustrative mathematics. Sandy, I'm sure you're familiar with them. So they're good problem-solving tasks to get kids engaged. There also is a resource guide for math where it was giving the academic vocabulary. Again, it was nice to see where our academic vocabulary lined up and where maybe there were terms that we were missing so we could add those in. And then they also did a look back at the previous grade level standards as well as a look forward, and so we showed those to the teachers as well. For language arts, one thing that's new this year that we talked about with our staff is that students will have listening items on the actual test. So when we test, all the students will have to have headphones and earbuds. The listening sections basically are about a 3-minute piece where someone gives information regarding a topic. So for example, in one of the sample items, they talk about asteroids for 3 minutes and use some pretty complex scientific language. So one thing that's new is that we're encouraging our language arts teachers to make sure that if they're doing any listening type activities, give the kids scratch paper so they can take notes. On the test, they can play it back as many times as they need. But also we're encouraging our teachers to use the online resources in the textbook where it can read a passage aloud. Use Audible and other things we have at our disposal to have passages of novels read aloud. Even a teacher reading a passage aloud and then having students respond to it. It's something we don't normally do. Our kids know how to answer questions, but they don't know how to really listen for details in that type of setting. And so we just want to mirror that for them in the classes. The writing rubrics have been released, so we've pushed our 3rd through 5th grade teachers towards that. We've also pushed the 6th to 8th grade teachers towards their rubrics as well. And then for science, they also have some sample activities. The computer science ones in particular are helpful because those are new this year. We've never tested computer science before. And so working with Christina Perez, who runs Point at the elementary level for the digital citizenship curriculum, as well as our 6th to 8th grade DCT teachers, we're making sure that both the science teachers and the DCT teachers are getting everything that we need. The DOE has released performance level descriptors. What it does is basically it sort of breaks down the standards to those 4 levels. Some teachers like them and they definitely lend themselves to developing some rubrics and things like that. Personally, I feel like the wording changes in some of them are so minute, they're not the best resource, but we did want to share with teachers everything that was available. Item specification database, this was huge because in it for every standard, they broke down what item types possibly would show up regarding that standard. They broke it down by depth of knowledge levels, which is something we talked with our staff about quite a bit. And they also talked about any accommodations that might be given for those types of questions as well. And so we shared that resource with teachers to be able to pull up those documents and look at. The sample item repository, for every grade level AIR, the test vendor released about 10 questions so that way students or teachers could go in and practice. Within those sample items, students also can turn on any of the accessibility features, so if they need text-to-speech, they can practice with those by turning text-to-speech on for any sort of accommodation that they might have in their individual plans. And then they gave us answer keys for them. And then the other thing that we talked quite a bit about is Smarter Balanced, which is a major test vendor. They are the ones who are helping the DOE get the sample items for the test. And so we pointed our teachers towards this as an additional resource. The nice thing about this is if you do the item repository, you have to do every question in it. If you just want to focus on a single question in class as a bell ringer, exit ticket, or if you want to break it down instructionally, this is a better way to do that. So the same way that we stole a little bit from Park to prepare for ISTEP, we're going to steal a little bit from Smarter Balance because that is really where they're pulling some of these items from. The nice thing with Smarter Balance is for some of those performance tasks, then they deconstruct how to score them and the types of scores students would get if they gave a certain response. One thing that our teachers like to do are use anchors or samples of student work so they can put it up there and say, okay, here was the question, here's how the student responded, what did they do well, what could they have done better? And there's usually a pretty good conversation you can have there with kids. And in that case too, because you're just using a generic sample from the company, it's not putting a student from class's work up there for someone to feel they were being questioned about what they had personally done. So these are all the different resources that we've given to our teachers thus far. I know that Teresa has met with all of her 3rd and 4th grade teachers. I've met with all of our 5th through 8th grade teachers. I met with 5th grade separately, 6th to 8th grade, and then I also met with all the 6th to 8th grade special education teachers as well, and the high school biology. We feel like we're in a pretty good place, but we'll see how things go with this new test. Year 1 is always a little bit rough, but we have a lot of resources available for our staff.
That's great.
Questions?
Any questions? I have a quick question about the untimed. You said before it's untimed, which is great because students work at different pace, different speed, each one. But you talked about at the end of the day, if they're not done, they pause it. But they can't go back the next day. They can't go back to the questions that were on the test from the previous day, but they can go forward from where they paused?
Correct.
Okay.
Because they want to see the question to go and get the
Yeah,
answer.
I understand. Yeah. Okay.
It is interesting with the writing though, with the performance task, math and science you have to do in a single day.
Okay.
But for language arts, they've said you can pause the performance task, like that lengthier essay, and you can come back to it the next day, which does mirror what we do in class. We have the students draft, and then we have them go back and look at it with fresh eyes the next day. It's just, it is showing that the state does want them to put forth their best effort, in my opinion. It's a little interesting, but I think it could be beneficial for our kids.
So I have a question. At the middle school and at the high school, the majority of the teachers proctor the test, right?
Correct.
So it's not just language arts and math and science, it's...
Correct. We did talk with them about how this does give us the flexibility because you can pause. Because before, the limitation of the middle schools, we have 47-minute class periods. How much of a test can you do? They're always longer than that. With the ability to pause it, you could run it with the classroom teachers. You could even run a pseudo block schedule like the high school has, at least at 90-minute chunks. The one thing that the staff said was they liked the fact that the whole building was shut down, everyone was focused on testing, and that was sort of that dedicated time within the school. And so the middle school principals did talk with their staff, and I believe at this point they've decided they are going to shut down and have that 2 or 3 hour delayed schedule. And then in the afternoon, what they might do is sort of a half schedule. The first day they'll do periods 1 through 4 in the afternoon. The next day they'll do periods 5 through 8. But I think they're still probably going to do it that way, at least for this school year.
Makes the most sense.
But we did give them that option if they wanted to look into it.
Okay, and so my question is going to be, this is a lot of information, a lot of great resources. So teachers are teaching the regular class, and yet they're supposed to have time to do the research and read and get well versed in this. How is that happening? Are you allowing release time, grade level teams, departments meeting, or help me understand
Any and
all
all
that?
of the above. I can only speak to how I set it up at the middle school. At the middle school, we took full days where in the morning we overwhelmed ourselves with resources. And then we spent the afternoon allowing them time to look through them. Since then, there are, like the math department chair, Clark has taken a day to come together with his teachers and go through some stuff that they found that was good, but as they're busy teaching, they found a day that worked for them to get pulled out of class, and they worked through it together. So we were the ones who set the initial dates for going over all this. If a group of teachers at a building wanted extra time, there was a principal who told me the other day that they're going to have 3rd and 4th grade teachers together for a day after break to go through this a little bit more. So the first day we set up that we need to meet with all of them and want to try to get them together, but after that, it's whenever it's best for them.
Yeah, I would encourage that, because when you get a group of professionals together, you learn from each other, and it's pretty powerful.
Definitely, and I think as they've all been sort of poking around at different resources, they've found what works, what didn't. I mean, I told them I have no ego on this. This is my first year with this test. If you discover something amazing and helpful, share out with the rest of the group. So we've had email chains going on about things that people have stumbled across or found out as well.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Good. Any other questions, Sarah? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our, just wait for the lights.
I can talk in the dark. I'm okay with that.
I was like, wait a minute, I can't read this in the dark. Okay, moving on to our Director of Special Education, Becky Grimal.
My first item is to seek your approval for the professional leave requests that were in your packet.
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Marshall. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have a second? Is it Dr. Malcolm?
It was.
Okay. We have a second from Dr. Malcolm. Any comments or questions regarding those professional leave requests? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And then for my second item, just to continue on the assessment theme, I had the opportunity the last week in November to spend 3 days in Indianapolis working with AIR and the Department of Ed on the development of the IAM assessment, which is our new alternative assessment. So one of the things in listening to Sarah talk that is really nice is this is the first time in a while that we've had the same vendor for both the standard assessment and the alternate assessment. So the way the resources are lined up, it looks exactly the same. The sort of priority blueprint that Sarah shared with the number of questions, that's the same. So it's really nice to have a little bit more similarity between our two populations. But at the end of my time in Indianapolis, one of the representatives from the Department of Ed asked that we share out what this process looked like because they don't think that educators as a whole are as aware of the amount of work they put into developing these tests. So that's why I'm talking to you tonight. So I was part of a group that reviewed all of the science and social studies questions for the alternate assessment. So we actually reviewed more than any other group there. So we looked at 180 questions. The group consisted of a representative from AIR, a DOE assessment specialist. There was one administrator in every group, so that was my role. We had 2 general ed teachers and then 4 special education teachers. And we looked at every question, and we looked at it based on the document that was included in your board packet. So we looked at the item specifications, the alignment to the content connectors, the depth of knowledge to make sure that we had a mix. We looked at it for any sensitivity, accessibility, so we went through every item. And we'd all review it individually and then talk about it. So they wanted districts and educators to understand that that's the process they follow for every assessment. So there's not a single question that goes in front of students that has not been reviewed by a large group of people to make sure that it makes sense. So, we found scoring errors. There were graphics that didn't quite match up with the questions. We had a lot of discussion about depth of knowledge and are we really making sure that this is a rigorous assessment for this population of students. So it was a really interesting experience. It was a long 3 days, but I was happy I had the opportunity to participate, and I'm hoping I'll be able to go back in the summer when they actually start reviewing the results and setting the standards as far as passing and what that's going to look like. So it was a good experience, and it sort of gave me some more faith in our assessment process, that there really is a lot of work put into it, and teachers are very involved in it, and making sure that we really are assessing our students fairly and aligned with what we're supposed to be teaching them. So
That's the key.
So,
That is great.
Thank you.
Any
So
questions?
what type of students would be taking the IM test?
So this is our alternate assessment for our students with significant cognitive disabilities.
Like
So
10%?
it's 1%. Last year our cap is supposed to be 1%. That is the cap set at the federal level.
Okay.
Last year within Lake Central, it was 1.34% of our students.
Okay.
So these are students who are pursuing the certificate of completion versus any type of diploma. And that's who takes it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious, and I don't know if you would know this answer, but we're doing so much in depth for that 1%. Are we doing the same, is the state doing the same thing for the 99%?
It is. This is the
still?
same
Okay.
process they used to develop iLearn.
Okay,
And believe it or not, that's the process they used for iStep years ago.
Right.
And then something happened.
Right.
I don't know what happened, but.
All right, any other questions or comments?
No.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much, Becky.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to Director of Facilities, Bill Ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Baxell. Tonight, I have just a couple update items. First off, I want to update the board, kind of the final update on the water main break of August 29th at Coling. I'm happy to report that earlier this month, we received our claims check from our insurance company, and we were reimbursed in full minus our deductible. And I'd like to thank Mrs. Cruz and the teachers involved for getting the documentation to me and my secretary, Sheila Novotny, as well. And we had a really good packet put together, and they processed our claim very quickly and gave us the full amount minus our deductible. So that's on, and Rob's department will start getting some reimbursements to some teachers who fronted some money early on, and we'll get some other things replaced as Cassandra reports to us. But any questions on that? Another update on the maintenance building. Things are going very well. I'm happy to report. All the exterior items are complete with the exception of painting the bollards, and hopefully we'll get that this week with the weather projected to be in the mid-40s tomorrow or the next day. We are totally done inside with all the liner panel and the drywall. We could not tape and paint because we were waiting on NIPSCO, and last Thursday we received power, and this morning they ran the gas line. They actually set the meter about 4 o'clock tonight, so my technicians come in tomorrow to start the heat in there, and my painter and tapers come in there tomorrow as well to start taping and painting the drywall. The electrician has the whole garage area trimmed out, all the lights are on. The mechanical work is 95% done. We're waiting on some louvers that are supposed to be in the end of this week, and my plumber's waiting until we get the bathroom painted and taped so he can set all his fixtures there. He's just waiting on my phone call. So I'd say right around the first year, and hopefully we'll be going for the occupancy inspection. So it's going very well, and hopefully we'll move over in there sometime in January. We'll start moving. We do have that little training room for the bus drivers. That we have to put the ceiling in yet, but that goes after we paint and tape. So that's a suspended ceiling, but again, it's just a matter of getting it taped and painted. So right after the holiday, we'll hopefully have a occupancy permit.
Good, great. Any questions?
And then you knocked down the old building?
Yes, the green building, but we probably won't do that till spring break. So it doesn't interfere with Christian, his bus drivers. It won't take us very long. We'll empty it out in January and February, and when spring break hits, my guys, it's already contracted. It's just a matter of, calling NIPSCO to disconnect the power, and then we'll knock it down over spring break.
Good thing to get rid of.
Yes, that will be a good time.
Yes.
Get rid of that eyesore. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Bill. All right, moving on to our Director of Business Services, Rob James.
Thank you, Don. First time to seek your approval for the donations that were originally in your board packet and with the update that was at your station this evening.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Suze.
Second.
We have a second from Ms. Lessenty. Any comments or questions regarding those donations? All right, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And my second item is to seek your approval on the extracurricular purchase that was presented in your board packet.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Lessenty, and I shall second that motion. Any comments or questions regarding our extracurricular purchases?
No, but that sounds really exciting for Grimmer.
Yeah.
I'm sure they need it. That's great.
Uh-huh.
And it's good that they all work together, the band, the choir, and the athletics.
Well, it's for the gym, and
Right.
they all use it.
Absolutely.
So it's not really fair for just one to try to take on the full
Yeah.
load. So, yep.
Good idea.
All right. Let's take a vote on it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Rob. All right, moving on to our public comments section this evening, and we have 3 people signed up. We have Daniel Rising. Could you please come forward? Thanks.
Daniel Rising, 14902 93rd Avenue, Dyer, Indiana, 46311. I was just looking for a couple of updates from you guys on any disciplinary actions for the communication issues that some of the other parents that I've spoken with have brought up. We haven't heard anything lately about that. They asked me to check on that. And then the stop arms. There was discussion about the cameras on the stop arms, where we were at with that, when that was gonna be implemented, if there was any new information there. And then I had one more, but if it comes to me, I will ask it. But the stop arms was the big thing we were asking.
Christian Flores told Dr. Rocco and I last week he was expecting that in this week to put on
Okay.
some buses, and I think he was gonna hopefully start testing that right after winter break.
After the break, okay,
Yes.
yeah, we were just looking.
Yeah, they were ordered and they're supposed to be in this week.
Okay, excellent. Oh, and then the.
But that was just to clarify, that was just to test them, to see
Yeah,
if that was
just
something
to
we
see-
want.
Yeah, just for
Right.
one.
We're
bus.
not
We just
committed to
wanted
doing
see
it.
Right, that's for one
Yeah.
how
bus.
the testing was going
That's
with
for
you
one
guys,
bus.
if it was something you would like. And then Dr. Baracco, do you have any updates on the state audit? The state safety?
Yeah,
audit?
something happened to our auditor. Steve Ulrich was stricken with some type of illness. And so Milan, the retired SRO from Crown Point, has gotten our school, but he won't be able to get to the second half of his schools until after Christmas break. He's finishing up North Lake County, which he was originally assigned, and then he's gonna get to us. But he has been in communication with Terry Mucha
Okay.
this week,
Okay.
matter of fact, last Friday and then again today.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I was just curious about that. And then just a concern from a couple of individuals that I've spoken to. There are, and I know Ms. Suze, you weren't at the last St. John meeting, but if you're there for the next week, I was told that there's, and I'm sure most of you are aware, there are some interesting things going on in the town of St. John now with allegations, and I just have been asked that as the board, as that falls under 3 of our schools, that specific district, that it's just something you guys try to stay informed on and try to stay up with. And it's just a request, I don't wanna get into all of it, but it was just something that I was asked to bring up to you guys tonight. So, thank you, have a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and a great New Year.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Danny. Moving on to, we have Lori Ryan.
Lori Ryan, 13608 West 117th Avenue in Cedar Lake. I am not in your district, but I work as a bus driver. I just want to be clear that I'm understanding it right. So on those raises, anyone who was contracted before January 30th, 2018 does not have the option. Am I correct?
That is not the case. Everyone has the option.
Everyone has the option. No matter, as long as they have a regular route, they have the option.
They're a contracted driver, they have the option. Yep.
Okay, then I misunderstood that, so I'm glad I asked that question. Okay, my other question was for the 2 different options that Dr. Baracco presented to us on the 10th. Will we each be given, if we choose like one or the other, will we each be given a paper to sign that has everything laid out as to what it all entails? Or,
Well,
'cause
the
I asked
only
Christian
only
Flores and he
difference
wasn't
is
sure.
the hourly rate. All of the other information on the information sheet that I passed out at that meeting remains the same.
Okay, so like stating that the sick days roll over to the personal days, will it state how many days you
You mean
have?
personal
Yes.
days roll over to sick days?
Well,
So we developed a form
Okay.
that will have option A or option B that says, I am choosing to have the rate of $22 an hour, or option B, I'm choosing the rate of, $24 an hour, and it spells out what those personal and sick day allotments would be in accordance with each plan.
Okay, so
Yeah,
there'll
it says
be
it on there.
one form that you mark then? There won't
The
be two.
employee will mark and
Right.
sign and turn in, yes.
Okay, so, on that letter then, will it also state, that we'll have the option in August 2020 if they wanted to switch back? Because there was discussion on.
It is indicating that this is what they are, this is the pay rate that the employee is choosing for the rest of this current school year.
Correct.
And for the following 19-20 school year. That's the furthest of the language, because it's only for that next time.
Okay, so in August 2020, I thought at that meeting you had said that.
You'll do it
If you
again.
choose the
Right.
higher rate,
Go
you're
back the
staying
other
on it for
way.
18 months. If you choose to stay the way you're doing it now, you can't opt for the higher rate and no sick days in August of 19.
Okay, all right. Now,
also there, as far as those letters that you get, like say you exhaust all your days and then you would receive a letter, like it's per medical illness, right? It's not per day that you take off, correct?
That I don't know.
So per occurrence versus per day, you're asking?
Right. So say you only had the 3 days that you have given and you get pneumonia and you exhaust those 3 days. Now, on the 4th day, you are sick, you take the day off, your days are exhausted, you receive a letter. On the 5th day, you're still sick. On Friday, you don't come to work that day because you're still ill with pneumonia. Do you receive another letter?
You'd use all your personal days first,
Right.
and then you're gonna get a letter per incident.
Per incident of illness or per incident of day?
Per incident of illness.
Of illness, okay. And will that state that on that letter that we mark?
No, because that's just the practice how it's always been.
That's
So
the
nothing's
practice.
changing there.
Okay. That's the practice how it's always been, okay. All right, and then on that, so you would receive 3 letters and then the 4th letter would be the termination letter, correct?
Well, you're gonna use your 3 personal days, and then you're gonna get 3 more incidents where no questions are gonna get asked. Then you're gonna start your warnings.
Okay, so you get 3.
So on the 4th time that you take a day off without pay, you're gonna get a warning. Then you're gonna get a warning on the 5th time, and then you're gonna get a warning on the 6th time. And then
Of
on
the
the
day
7th
off.
time, we're gonna say thank you, but it really will have been your 10th time.
Right.
Not really your 10th time, because if your first sickness is 3 days, you're using all your paid days up at
Right.
once.
And then if you go longer than those 3 days, then you receive your first letter.
That's the first warning,
Okay.
correct?
All right, so, and then say the following month you get sick again and you can't come to work, then you would receive your second letter for
Correct.
that illness.
Correct.
Okay, so it's per illness then. I understand. Now, what was another question somebody else had asked? They have a lot of questions, it's a lot of confusion, I think. Once that letter comes, I don't know if you can.
We can come back down.
Maybe, yeah, come back and explain to people because it is very confusing to some people. Like, how would the personal days roll over if you still had them?
Just
Would
like they always
continue?
do.
Just like they always do? Okay. All right. I think it'll be okay. You just need to.
I'll come back
explain
down.
that to
I don't know if
people.
I can do it tomorrow, and it's not enough notice anyway for people.
Yeah. No, 'cause a lot
But
of people
before the
miss
break,
Bless you.
Wednesday, Thursday, or
Okay.
Friday, we'll come down. I'll talk to
Because
Christian first thing in the
A lot of
morning.
people did miss that first meeting that you were
Okay.
at because they were working on a trip or something. So there was, a lot of confusion. So, but I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
All right, our last speaker is Jesse Rippe. Is that correct? Jesse Rippe? Guess they must have left. It was, they were gonna speak about the Protsman Spell Bowl, so. All right,
Protsman spell.
about the Protsman Spell Bowl. All right, well, moving on to our board comments and consideration of future agenda items, and I'll start with Mr. Marshall.
Well, thank you. I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Malka?
I have nothing at this time either, so have a good Christmas and see you in January, everyone.
All right,
Good comment.
Ms. Lessenty?
I just want to say happy holidays to everybody. Have a wonderful season.
All right, Ms. Hughes?
Same thing. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
All right. I just want to congratulate the Vivitch and Protsman Spell
Oh,
Bowl
that too.
group again. Those kids are awesome. They're amazing when they come through. You can tell they're excited, and some of them are very, very nervous to be here. But it's great to have those little guys come across and be congratulated for their endeavors. Again, thank you for the land donation to Tom and Andrea Plaskota. That was awesome. Classified raises, I'm glad to see that those went through. I'm very happy for that. And then I just want to, as well, wish a Merry Christmas and, and a Happy New Year to everyone. So we'll move on to our board calendar of future activities. Dr. Bracco.
Yeah, we're back on January 7th, so happy holidays to everyone. And we'll see you then.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. And we have a second.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.